Has anybody joined the live? As, yeah? I think I'll close this window. Couch and the seats. Stuart will be with us in 20 minutes. I don't know.
No, he's by the amphitheater. Yeah, but
That's what the intervention did, or my apology did. Yeah. He's coming in a few minutes. Yeah, Kezia. Yeah, Kezia, I think you can join. Yeah, is that okay? Excellent. Good evening, everybody. So, glad to have all of you here. Please take your seats if you're waiting. The objective of this panel discussion or a Q&A is mainly to get a sense of the residency, the program that we've had over the last 3 weeks up here at Woodstock, and mainly for alumni guests who are both present in physically and also folks who couldn't make it, who are in different places. They're joining us live. Welcome, everybody. So with that, we're going to have a number of questions discuss about the program, what that was like, the exhibition. You'll get to see the exhibition for those who are live. You'll get to see the exhibition after the discussion. We're going to have a live walkthrough on Instagram. So please stay tuned for that. Stefan, would you like to join us? So I wanted to go around the circle first, and just to introduce ourselves, what class we were, and then we'll get into more of the discussion.
Hi, I'm Shubhashish Bhutyani, class of 2009.
Hi, I'm Tanya Garg, class of 2012.
Hi, I'm Chris Green, class of 1990.
Stefan Eicher, class of 1990.
Isaac Gergen, class of 2006.
Kezia Paljor, class of 2016.
Madison Moore, class of 2012.
And lastly, Sam Hanish, class of 2004.
And since we're a small group, can we pass the mic around into the audience as well? And maybe you could share how you're involved with Woodstock or which class you graduated in, name and class year.
Okay, hi, I'm Jamie Williams. I'm the director of the Center for Imagination.
Hi, I'm Addy. and I work in the alumni office.
Hi, I'm Joshua Hishi, and I graduated in 1999.
My name is Chiring. I'm the spouse of class of 80.
I'm Jeshi from the class of 2006, like Isaac over here.
I'm a fourth generation Woodstocker, Kabir Upper, class of 2006.
Joey from class of 2006. That's Joel. He's Jeshi's younger brother. He grew up on the hillside.
And behind you?
I'm Asta. I work as Deputy Head Communications. I'm also alumni spouse of Joey's wife.
And I'm Katie Jo Walter, and I joined about 3 months ago as the new Director of Advancement and Alumni Relations here at Woodstock.
Oh, please come. Please come in. There's plenty of seats here. Hi, guys.
I'm Dhruv Lakhanpal, and I was in the class of 2016.
I'm Varun, class of 2016.
I'm Aditya, class of 2016.
Super. Great to have you guys here. Cool. So for those who just entered, we're having a Q&A discussion on the residency program that was happening here for the last 3 weeks. Alumni residency program. So all of us are alumni and we're artists, right? So to begin, I wanted to bring about the thought of community, what community means and how. So for me, whenever I've come back to Woodstock, it's been with a group of friends, with my group of friends, with classmates. But here we have a representation from the earliest being class of 1978 and the youngest being class of 2021. That's a 44-year span of span between the years, right? So very different experiences. Just wanted to bring the aspect of community, how our group formed community, and even with such a diverse range of experiences. I'm looking at who, Shubi, could you? Yeah.
So how do we kind of find shared community? So I think there were two things early on that sort of, we realized we shared no matter when we had been at Woodstock. I think the geography is one. We began by just kind of running through lists of the places that we used to enjoy spending time at, places on the hillside, kind of comparing notes, and especially comparing what we had noticed had changed. So I would say just kind of like the map of Woodstock was a point where we found commonality, and then as things went along, realizing sort of shared slang and Woodstock terms, I think was also a kind of a bonding mechanism. Anyone else?
Stuart has to introduce himself. Hi, I'm Stuart Gelser, class of 1978.
So back to community.
So one of the things we had to do was we had to quarantine for 5 days before we could enter school, right? So we were all quarantined up in CC, which was a really frustrating time. I mean, because you can imagine we're coming back after years and we aren't allowed to go into campus, we aren't allowed to go into the bazaar. We're stuck in one place, right? But one of the things in retrospect that happened was that gave us a lot of time to spend time together, right? So that was one layer of community. And as we kind of spent time, I think many layers kind of were uncovered. Layers of memory, layers of experiences, our shared experiences, but also individual experiences. And and then in the art making, it was a different layer almost, and at the same time, personal experiences were slightly different compared to our art processes. So I think it has been repeated across our conversations that it was not so much about the product that you see around in the exhibition, but what I really feel is the artwork of this whole program is the conversations that we had, really deep conversations on, I mean, it was not always deep, it was also convivial, but it was a lot of introspection, trying to make sense of what we were going through, and the big difference was, again, like I mentioned earlier, it was not a leisure trip. It was we're coming back and we're engaging with everything in Woodstock, all the spaces, and even earlier a comment that came up was in this kind of deliberation, in this kind of walking around, eating together, there was everything seemed activated. Every space, every nook and corner, every brick, could be something that we got encouraged by. So in understanding all of that, and in comprehending all of that as a group, I think there also community formed, right? As we shared experiences, as we shared, as we made sense of the changes, the old, the new.
This is a very unusual residency program for me. I've been in multiple residency programs where artists are sort of treated as kind of a fragile commodity, left alone to do the work, and there's no emphasis on sharing. Community is really would be like a byproduct, an emission, if you will. But for this kind of, I think we used the word intensive a couple of times, and so coming together, being together, of course, we're all alumni, so we know what dorm life is like. So immediately we were like, okay, Maggie, Chupples, like all that stuff just sort of flowed. We had a lot of, so a lot of comparative storytelling brought that together. But then, as we've been saying before, we weren't, at least I wasn't totally concerned with what everybody else was doing or what they were going to do. And that was a much later conversation, maybe day 4. It was like, wait, so what are you working on? What are you going to do? I don't know. Are we going to react to this? And we were sort of deciding, because this is a pilot project. Everything about this is like, let's try this, and then we'll adjust. It's not some perfect template that is being placed upon the school and us. We're just sort of feeling it out. And because we're all flexible, we just sort of kept moving through it. So eventually the idea started to percolate, and then once we were released, we were just out and about. And then it was like go out all day and come back and share notes and talk. But the idea of having everyone sort of say, so what are you doing? Why? Not in a critique way, but you know what I'm saying? Like there was a sense of, okay, if you're doing this, maybe I should do more. And I think for me, all that into any kind of exploration. And so for me, I worked on multiple things. Some people just focused on one thing, but I felt so, there was a multivalent kind of approach for me. So that's where we kind of, our paths diverged a bit. But then there was always the CC, like the home base, as it were. And we're still getting along, right? For the most part, no?
It's over.
It's over. Does that, yeah. So community, it's like or you call it like a temporary autonomous zone, all these terms that you can use to describe what this is all about. But it is an experiment, right? It's something that we'll talk about and we'll process and we'll pull best practices from and hope that this continues as a way to generate work that otherwise would never happen.
For me, it was, all of those things, but then I think community just happened in the same way it happened when I was in school, which is where you need to have something, you need to have an art project for the exhibition, and you don't know what you're going to do, and you call on anybody you can to sort of help you, and I think every single person has helped me come up with an idea, cut out some of the stuff for my project. Like Satish over there has helped me so much. He helped me clean the Bukhari. Like every single person has helped me. So I think for me it was when like you procrastinate your project and you have to finish it. That's when community really meant a lot to me.
And I think, I mean, from the get-go, we were very intentional about the mix of this group, right? Having national artists and international artists, intergenerational. So along with
I thought
that,
we were all Indian.
at heart, right? I think one of the interesting things I also sort of saw was different disciplines informing each other. Shubi's filmmaking informing, or thought process, film thought processes, the praxis informing painting, and installation informing photography, vice versa, right? Adding to what you were sharing as well.
Shubi didn't even make a film. Shubi made an art project.
I called Isaac like 1 week before we left from Bombay to come here. And I was like, Isaac, I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know if this is a good idea. And I was like kind of panicking a little bit. And he just keeps saying, clean slate, just come as a clean slate. Like, don't have ideas. And I still I don't like coming so unprepared. But at one point, I kind of just like, it was kind of religiously, in a way of experiencing detachment and really just saying, I'm just going to come and see what happens. And then I started doing all these things that I naturally would run away from. I never would do an art project, like art installation kind of thing. I would never teach a class. And honestly, I have to say, apart from hanging out with these fine people, the teaching that class was like we did a workshop for screenwriting, which Isaac came 2 days before we wanted to do it and was like, Shubi, would you be willing to do a workshop? I was like, I don't know how to do that. And he was like, yeah, but it's okay. I said it'll be really informal. And we did it and so many people showed up and I got to interact with like maybe 40 kids and like 20 adults, 10, 15 adults. And we just sat around here discussing ideas. And honestly, I honestly at that moment felt everything was worth it because I just got to experiencing a new part of myself, experiencing a new part of them. And yeah, so in terms of community, for me, just engaged in communities in ways that I didn't expect. And I think that was, yeah, my experience in a nutshell of the whole thing. You don't have to ask me any more questions.
And that was also another aspect that through the program we had opportunities to engage with the students, with staff, and in fact, some of those interactions informed the work we ended up doing. Like we had a session with Mr. Akshay at the Hannafil Center, and that one hour we spent with him was an eye-opener. And just an example was somebody said the sheen of the monkey's hair had dulled over the years, right? And there was a very specific reason for why that had happened. But like, thoughts like that and how forests are changing and all of that. So all that interaction with staff, knowledge, that informed the group as well. And today at lunchtime, we were having a debate for school president, right? And one of them referenced something that Sam had said, right, in their debate. So in terms of us as an alumni group, having influence or having a connection with students, that really brought it home.
Yeah, if I can jump in, I think we're talking about the role of community here, which is sort of it's like a little microcosm of really the larger alumni community and the potential that lies within this larger group of people who don't really all know each other, right? We know the folks in our years or 3 years up and down, but what was so profound about this experience of bringing multiple generations, multiple years, like we said, spanning 44 years of graduating classes, for me was one conversation I had with the guy right at the end there, Stuart, right? So we're we're having breakfast together, and Stuart says, and as most of you all know, or if you're online, you may not know, but the quad dining hall has a line of old photographs. And so, being an alumni and currently a teacher also here at the school, so I see these photographs every single day, and so do all the students. And you just sort of walk by, and Stuart makes the comment that I know these people in these photographs, and it's very odd that I know that they have very full lives, right? They're very multifaceted, very colorful. They have full experiences of life. And here they've been reduced to a photograph. And not just a photograph, but sometimes, they're in a sort of position that's really awkward. These are these random shots. And what would they be thinking if this is all they're known by? This one, literally like a tenth of a second of their life. They're immortalized here. So anyway, we had that conversation, and because of, Stuart coming from this, an era that I have no connection to, it stunned me. And being part of the school, where there is a conversation happening. There's a question being asked, like, who are we? What does it mean? What is Woodstock, right? How do you sum it up how do you define who we are, right? And I realized in that moment, you really can't. There's a complexity to the answer. There's no simple answers, because there's these lives that are behind these photographs that you are completely out of touch with. And yet the interesting thing was by us being here, and that talking about community in the immediate, that one conversation over breakfast just opened up a whole understanding for me, and then translated into a work of art that, I've been having conversations with people about that work of art, and they're saying, it's like kind of like that conversation was a seed that is just kind of going on, and that's the beauty of art, is that there's these hundreds of hours of conversations, as you're saying, really at the heart of this thing, and every brick, every stone is sort of animated for us as alumni coming back. Like, we're just so conscious of every little detail everywhere. And so as artists, this is like this profound role that art can play, that to take in to all the stimuli and kind of process it, not just alone, but as a group, and bring all of our different perspectives in, and then out comes this work of art that has this ability to speak into these bigger issues. And I just think that's really so incredible about this experience we've had. I don't know if others have anything to comment on that.
And one of the things is, we had two artists step outside Woodstock premises and look at Missouri even, like the works that you see around here, Maddie's film that you'll see in the room adjacent, that was looking at the larger Missouri community and how that, how that informs us and contextualizing us. And again, with Mr. Akshay's conversation, environmentally, how it gives us context of our place in the Himalayas.
I just remember this one thing that Mr. Akshay said, that when we were there, we were like, when we think of Woodstock, we always think of it's the people that made the place what it is, and it's not the surroundings. But then he was like, that's because we don't interact with our surroundings enough to know that that's what makes Woodstock what it is. And it is the people, but it's also the environment. It's not just the people.
Exactly. Did you know that Missouri was named after a plant? Right. Masura berry.
Yeah, so I actually came a little bit late to the party, and I didn't join with the others until a week later. And it didn't feel like I had a whole lot of catch up to do in terms of us. It was, so maybe going into this community thing, I feel like this Woodstock identity, it's kind of like we discover we all have this matching tattoo. even though we don't fully know what it is, and we're like all kind of deciphering it, but it's like, oh yeah, it links us together. And even just sort of coming in a week later, I felt this connection to all of you guys, which made it very easy and natural for me to kind of come into that. And at the same time, there's this very, very individual, very personal approach to what does Woodstock, what does Missouri mean to me and to all of us, which I think shows just in the really broad spectrum of works that kind of got made. And I feel like each of us kind of had our own little dig site where we were kind of like going into our feelings, our memories, and then again sort of in our conversations with each other, kind of holding these things up to one another, and then finding sort of common ground or that matching tattoo, but at the same time, at least for my part, sort of having this my perspective on Woodstock and what Woodstock is broadened by each of your guys' stories. So it's a funny thing, Woodstock, isn't it?
Joshua John, who's the seventh artist, he had a thought of almost a disconnect between his experience at Woodstock when he graduated in 1988, and his experiences of then, and he's been coming up to the hillside, since then, but how that memory has transformed. So that kind of segues into our next sort of section where we can reflect on memory, and that was a huge component of our process, I think. I mean, initially, just remembering a lot of our experiences, good and the bad, dealing with them, and then finding ourselves within that context, in the context of what memory was then and how new memories were forming. Does that make sense?
Maybe I'll just keep going. So for me, this sort of leading up to this residency, there was this maybe expectation of how being back here after a couple of years was going to kind of make me feel, or what that was going to stir up in me, or how it was going to activate me emotionally in terms of memories and things like that. And I found it to be very, very different from my expectations. So there was no sort of, or very, very limited nostalgia. I actually discovered that there were, I don't want to say gaps in my memory, but sort of after all these years, my understanding of where things were kind of in relation to each other had kind of shifted, and of course a whole lot of stuff and buildings had been added. But I found that the connection I was having to this place was very, very much in the physical, and I shared this at the round table. It was more in relation to smells, certain temperatures, being up on the CC basketball court at night, and a little breeze would come as we were playing cricket, and I was like, this is the temperature, this takes me back. And it wasn't actually so much this going down memory lane and sort of having these conversations that stir up things that happen, but just very bodily for me, which was interesting and odd, I guess.
You said it.
Sorry, like, I don't know. I mean, for me, it was, I kind of didn't want to engage too much in nostalgia when I came. It was like, actually, I think Madison and me had the conversation before. And I was just like, I don't want to be nostalgic. It's just not going to happen. But then you're walking on the hillside, and the person who used to cook meals for you recognizes you. You can't not engage with that. I see a teacher and they're so happy to see me, and they call me over for tea, and it feels like I got sick for 2 days, and my old teacher started visiting me while I'm like with a fever, and I was like, this is literally like me in the health center. So I was running away from it, but these moments kept like with a flashlight were running at me, and I couldn't. And then they put me up in the dorm I stayed in ninth grade. You know, same bathroom, same. I mean, the rooms changed now. There's like a little nicer, but so I don't know. For memory, for me is just actually my whole project's kind of with memory because it deals a lot with nostalgia. Even though that's the one thing I didn't kind of want to engage with too much. But at the same time, there was a big sense of presence for me at the same time. Like it was almost like comparing, but at the same time seeing what's different, but also constantly reminding myself what's the same. There's a lot of things that are still the same, and many of those times it's like, I think like what you said, it's like this really specific feelings. It's just like walking from school to dorms. The walk is exactly the same. So you don't feel like anything has happened, and you can kind of see sometimes you can see the ghosts of yourself, you know, being like, oh, okay, I was with my friends here. This is where we hid. This is where we did like the not nice things behind that water tank. Shoot, sorry, whoever's already here. But I don't know. So I think, yeah, I'm still kind of a succinct reply to this question, except that I think you put me in Himachal, and like it would have been a completely different project, completely different me, but you put me literally in my place with most potent memories, most potent like people and everything, and then you're like, okay, now make something. So it's like not super easy or hard or anything, it's just, it definitely stirs up a lot, and a lot of things change and stay the same as well, so it's, yeah.
For me, throughout my life, like all my artwork has kind of been referencing back to Woodstock in one way or the other. So now that I was here, I didn't know how to like reference the reference. So I shared this exact sentiment at like one of our chai times, and it was like, I think like 3 days till the exhibition, I had nothing. But then we started talking about it, and Chris suggested this toy theater. But for me, I think it worked because it was a way of stepping outside of my mind and being able to still look at it and seeing all the various parts. And like I stopped trying to look for metaphors and just kind of did what came naturally, and then kind of looked at the complete project afterwards. So I think, but that was the biggest thing. How do you, if this is like the genesis, like how much further do you go back? So I think that was a really interesting exploration for me. Is that good enough?
I'm not following that.
That was very good.
So, cool. So before we move on to the next segment, does anybody in our circle have any questions? Hi, Mira. There's a seat if you. Anybody have questions that you'd like to pose at this point? Yeah? Yeah, go ahead. I can repeat it also.
Interacting amongst different generations, did it break that bias? I feel like I have a bias. I graduated in 2006, and you have that bias in that, like back in my day, things were like better, or now things are different. But did it break that bias when you were interacting with the senior alumni members or even the juniors? Did it kind of help you relate and kind of empathize and also be like, you know what, this is how do we go forward from here, instead of always kind of thinking about or just the nostalgia keeping you kind of in, it doesn't help you move forward, I feel sometimes, that bias. So did that break it with the interactions that you guys had?
So like the first few days when we were up at CC, I kind of I had like a mental shutdown for a little bit because I felt like my story wasn't authentic anymore. Like the things that kind of make me individual or different anywhere else, everybody here already had that, and like we're kind of competing in the beginning. Like, you know, like in my day, this happened or whatever. But then there was like these shared stories that like everybody knew a story about some guy who used stinging nettle as TP, or like, but you know, like it was all these stories that everyone kind of knew in like this like like mythology of Woodstock. But then when we came down to school, I had another mental breakdown, seeing how different high school was, and that there were no Bukaris, they had central heating, everything was super nice. Like, I hated it so much in the beginning. But then I think, like Shubi said, we started talking to students, and like they're so curious. They still come up, and you know they have those, like there's just some things that you like observe, and you're like, okay, the kids are all right. So I think in that sense it was nice. I think it's not a linear thing. I think it's cyclical, or more like a scribble, where you like think, oh yeah, like love for all of Woodstock and all the community, and then my class is the best, and like these kids won't know what we had. So I just think it's like a scribble. Yeah.
Thank you. Hi, so I'm actually going to address your thought and connect it back to the previous subject about memory. I am, if you've been keeping track of the numbers, I am the representative of the older generation. And I've had a number of conversations with teachers, with students over the past couple of weeks that have taken the form of, you know, how is it different from when you were here? And even specifically, you know, is the food better or worse or whatever, right? And I will say to you all gathered here that most of the time I've been lying when I answered, and the lie took the form of coming up with an answer at all, because the truth would have been, I don't remember. Like if they say, so I actually was in the library, I had a reason to go to the library, and the librarian said to me once, I said what year I graduated, she said, oh, and how much has the library changed? I looked around, and I had no memory of the library as it was, and I kind of looked over in the corner where there was like a desk that had been kind of paneled in with a little separation, and I said, I don't think that used to be there. And she said, oh yeah, that's relatively recent. I'm like, whew, because I really had no memory. And the same is true of, you know, things like the food. I'm like, you know, well, so I was 17 and 18. I felt somewhat differently about food in general than I do now. Was willing to eat a lot and a lot less critically than I do now. But I think I've had, like I say, that versions of that conversation over and over again where I have sort of given a little white lie of picking something, oh, it's a little better, or it's so much better, you know, when I was here. Meanwhile, inside, I'm thinking to myself, I have no memory of that. None. Zero. The only thing where there's a strong memory, strong enough that what there is now is unable to kind of erase it and build something new on top of that, is what Hostel looks like, which is just like a hotel sort of airlifted into the mountains and has no connection to the place that I lived. So, but in terms of your question, which was, you know, the sense of between generations of are things getting better, things getting worse, my sad answer is I don't remember.
So to chime in on that, and actually sort of the food and the dining room and all that, we were sitting together the other day and kind of going through what the sounds used to be like in the dining room with like the metal trays and everyone kind of, you know, emptying them out, and it just used to be so much noisier and more crowded than it is now, and kind of waxing nostalgic, I guess, about all of that. And I feel like there's always going to be a part of like the Woodstock that I experienced is like the real Woodstock. But of course, ultimately, we're doing the school a disservice when we kind of then hold on to that because we've changed. Woodstock has changed us. Woodstock is allowed to change on its own and have just whole new generations of students and staff shape the place and turn it into just not a new iteration, but just a different stage of one and the same thing. Yeah, I feel like transience is just a part of life.
I don't know, I think I can also say something like, just a thought that popped up in my head. It's like, I don't know, when you meet a friend after 15 or 20 years that you knew earlier, you know, he's changed, his clothing has changed, but there are certain jokes that you share that are still the same. But a part of you is like, how are you more sorted at the same time? It's kind of for me like meeting an old friend now where things about him have changed. Maybe he works out, maybe he's gotten fat, you don't know. But like, you know, you still have memories of your friendship of when you were 17, but you also have to know that he probably has new friends that like him that don't know that part of him, you know? So it's like kind of meeting a new person. So I feel like that. I feel like sometimes I'm meeting a new person, I'm in a new place, new school, new person, yeah. So for me, it's kind of, that analogy helps me.
Just to ask my fellow panelists, in terms of the theme of, or the idea of memories, so we've been talking about memories of the past, but how do you project this forward in terms of meeting your friend again and kind of reacquainting yourself with that person? How do you make sense of that? What role could there be, or what shape could that take?
See, these questions are pretty deep, right? Like, you have to think. So these pauses are actually not, you know, this is all like processing time.
What shape does it take? Like what now? What now? I'm curious to find out. I mean, this is the whole part of the experiment. We come through something. It's not a duress. Like in my day, there was a bit of suffering. I'm just saying, and maybe we should have like old school appreciation week where students have to live for one night in the way it was in my day, or something. And it's just, but you know, I think that's a good question. Those are the kinds of questions that kind of will unfold slowly. Just as much as there was a transition coming in, there's going to be a transition coming out. So I think, you know, part of this residency, someone said, so when does this residency end? When's it over? And I was like, I don't know, like officially yesterday, but then Sunday, but then what about Wednesday? But what about next year? I mean, are we going to just continue to have points of connection? And obviously we'll continue to be aware of each other thanks to social media. But I'm pausing on the answer because I feel like I want to see growth into friendship, and obviously part of this experiment was to say just be aware of each other. That was the main thing, because this all grew out of kind of a late blooming discovery that there were a lot of artists that came from Woodstock that are practicing artists, are serious artists in the trenches every day, slugging it out, self-identifying as artists. Maybe they do other things as well, but the point is that that's something that they feel deeply about. So as we discovered there was just more and more and more of us, this was a way to say, okay, let's start with this group, put them in a jar and shake it, see what happens, and then the next group would come and try to create some kind of reverberation through that. So I'm not answering your question at all. I'm doing a terrible job answering the question. But that's what's on my mind in terms of this group of people. This is just a tiny sampling, because what's the list now? Well, like 150 artists are listed as having graduated from Woodstock. And someone asked me today the earliest class. I don't have that answer, but I'm sure it goes all the way back. So point of discovery and renewal and getting past nostalgia and saying, okay, I remember Woodstock in 1989 and 90, beautiful, but that's a postcard now, and it goes here, and here's this one. And so it's a new Cairn on the path, if you will.
I'll just add something before I hand over to Tanya. But what strikes me, and this is I would wish this experience on all of you folks, because typically the alumnus, the experience is you come back, you have this curated tour, you might have a meal somewhere with your friends, but it is very clinical, right? You're just touching the surface, or you're viewing the surface. And yet this experience that we've had has gone deep, right? And we've engaged, and the design that Isaac put together here, and everybody else, all the partners, of where we wanted these folks here to connect with the students, right? To really engage the Woodstock current community, not just be on their own and make their own art. And so you guys have had this sort of deep dive into current Woodstock, and that's been the kind of this overflow of stimuli, because you're also dealing with all your memories of old Woodstock, and you're kind of revisiting those, and so now what is kind of the question, like, how do you make sense of this moving forward, having engaged so deeply?
I don't know if I'm answering the question right, but sometimes going with what Sam said, like when you meet someone who's from Woodstock, already by sharing that one thing, like a matching tattoo, it's like you already have context about them. Like you don't know what it is, but you just realize something about them. And I feel like for now, like the school has changed and the students are changed. But I think what kind of ties us together is all these kind of shared events that we had, because everybody has a story of them. Like if you flip back from the yearbooks, going from like, I don't know, like 50 years back or even longer, like Big Brother, Big Sister Day, like Sports Day, whatever. Speaking of Sports Day, like houses, like all those things, most of us are condors here. But like, but all of these things, like they matter because again, with like your comparative storytelling, like that's kind of where everyone kind of builds like their ownership of Woodstock also. So I think just kind of remembering that fabric of Woodstock is really important.
I mean, just to say something on what you said was that based on the conversation, I just went to college like 10, 12 years ago, and that time it was still weird for someone to go to art school. And I've been having so many conversations, and so many of the students seem to want to get into art or film design. I was like so surprised. And they're all kind of competing for Parsons. I'm wondering who the Parson rep is, that suddenly this college has become very popular here. But it was really surprising and heartening to see kind of the interest, because even when I was applying, there was like maybe 3 or 4 of us who wanted to go. That was still a lot. Now it was like, in a group I would meet 5 filmmakers, 3 people who want to get into design, 2 people architecture. It was like literally like crazy numbers. So I was really encouraged and also wanted to discourage them. No, I'm joking. But no, I was really encouraged to meet so many people who were into so much, and they would come and talk to us about that. So I think moving forward, I think at least for us, I don't know, but for them, I know that you're going to have a lot of opportunities to have residencies, because it seems a lot of artists are going to come out of here.
Hi, so I had a question. So I'm sitting in this room. A lot's changed, a lot hasn't changed. This entire room is new. This carpet is new. These chairs are the same, as uncomfortable as ever. But so I'm curious, so we have so many different eras of Woodstock represented here. I haven't seen the art yet, but did you guys notice like distinctive things that you guys were looking for in terms of your inspiration for work that you might have noticed within each other? They've like, oh, I didn't even think about this. This wasn't something that I never thought about.
I'll have to think for a moment. So it was kind of interesting. We've talked about how people didn't really arrive with ideas, and that's something that I would really credit these two with, Stefan and Isaac, that that they said come with that blank slate. So we arrived, and I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but it kind of felt like instead of gaining inspiration from other people for our own projects, kind of like Tanya indicated, there were moments where we could kind of advise others and be like, wait, I see this for you. Like now getting to know you, getting to understand your view of Woodstock and experience here, maybe try this, or you know, go in this, try a new medium, like Shubi did. So we were able to kind of give these little tips as opposed, and of course then we were receiving them too, but yeah, I would say it was like through those conversations and observations about other people's work, we were able to kind of give that advice.
Yeah, I'll just say that I felt, well, to some degree, Maddie with her film project, but I certainly felt a little bit separated from the general conversation about the themes for projects, in that my subject was not Woodstock at all. My subject is what you are seeing incessantly on a loop here, the photographs over there, and then the photographs of which there are a subset on a loop over there, all of which are from the bazaar. So for me, there was a distinct geographical, I was essentially working with the geographical separation between this place and its bubble and that place over there, and my work deliberately took me out of this bubble to that place every day. So yeah, that was my subject, and I was very aware that that many in the group, as I say, not so much Maddie, whose subject also was there, many in the group were working with their memories or feelings or whatever about Woodstock, about the hillside, this place. And for me, my work every day began, after a 20-minute walk. So yeah, there was that difference. You have a question?
Yeah. So coming over here, I mean, it's a real treat for us to get your reflections. I myself was never really artistic in school, but I realized the value of digesting memories, digesting experiences, and not only re-edifying yourself, but also, being able to bring forth a blessing to the new generations, both that are linked to us and worldwide as well. It's been a traumatic few years around the world. I think each one of us has dealt with it heavily. So would like to know from your side, what are some trigger points for you by being away, now that you've come back, but trigger points for you, like physical locations, whether it be like the mythology, or like you were saying, Daniel was saying about the TV tower and those kind of things, or cozy corner. What are some points that have triggered you? And not only for yourself, but how does this enable you to counsel others? I'm discovering that, all right, art can be a way of counseling the conflicts that are taking place around the world. So what are some physical... Ask Isaac.
I think if you walk around school, everyone will have their own personal trigger points. For me, like I said, the high school, but also going down to elementary school, and like where the sinks were, where you would go into the dining hall, which is like the noisiest, like wettest, like dirtiest, like so many people were in there. That area, it's shut off. There's nothing there. There's not even a tap in the sink. So that was really jarring for me. The quad library is like half. So there's like a lot of these places, but the thing is, I think what I made is kind of that stepping out of it, because then you like go look at other stuff and you're like, they have this amazing CFI building, and they have like lounges, and they have like, it just, something replaces the other, they find something else. Cozy Corner isn't, the roof isn't there, but now they're gonna have a nice restaurant there, so like, they're not gonna miss that. Like, they're not gonna miss that overpriced Maggie. So they're fine. So I think you just have to remind yourself to like preserve that memory, protect it, maybe make some art about it, I don't know.
For me, just to deviate slightly, my whole project started with thinking about YY. Like how YY is like a door of a time machine for me, because I don't eat it at home. But here, the first thing I want to do is eat YY, and kind of opened up the whole possibility to me about thinking about how things are connecting me to people. Like without YY, maybe I wouldn't have had so many friendships, or sitting in the kitchen and putting cheese and chilies. Like, sure, Woodstock thing to do, garlic chili. There's like 15 different variations. So it became like a whole exploration for me. I mean, exploration sounds a bit bougie, but just this idea of how products and things really connected us. And I mean, from places, I mean, even when I went to Edge Hill the other day, and I couldn't, like, it's a little heartbreaking, because I mean, we were children there, and now, you know, nobody plays on the basketball court, so that, but for me, it's like everything from Edge Hill down to, and then up to Midlands, of course, guys. That whole path, that whole, I mean, I was like, yesterday we were talking in but if you go to Char Dukan, even Anilji and Vipinji are talking about change, you know, it's not that philosophical, because they're also living in that, and they know what's up. I mean, they're making a lot of money and stuff, but they keep talking about how it was like so nice, or just 10 of you guys coming here, sitting behind the fridge. Am I allowed to say that? And yeah, everything was kind of everything can become like for me, it's not Woodstock, it's childhood that I'm kind of, you know, it's not the school itself. For me, it's like my whole youth and childhood was experienced here. So the whole walk, you know, somebody asked yesterday, like, what is the bazaar starting point? And we were all debating what the starting point of the bazaar is. And for me, it was the bazaar, the barrier, because that's when the Edge Hill kids would be allowed to go walk. Until then, we all walked in a line. And so that's the starting, and Union Church, the ending, like, because that's where they pick us up. So I mean, how you relate to places is so different. And then I still feel uncomfortable crossing Cambridge Bookstore. Because like, it's like there's this invisible line where if I walk past it, the alarms are going to go off. And people are going to come. So I mean, like, where do you kind of, it's so crazy, like how, I felt I was getting late for school at 8:30. I was like, I have to be down here by 8:39, you know? So it's crazy how, like, things, the bell, like, every sounds, places, objects have, like, kind of influenced me. I didn't think all of that would happen, but that's kind of, in a nutshell, yeah. That was a bit long.
Yeah, oh, dear, Sarah.
Yeah, so Jeshi, I find your question very, very interesting. Something I'm mulling through still, and I feel like these last couple of years have just been this collective sort of. We've had the rug pulled from under us globally, and the things that we believe to be kind of bedrock, unshakable, all of a sudden they're just like, they're gone, and so. Finding sort of in this, even in those aspects where we thought there was some kind of solidity or something that gives us something tangible to hold on to, even there finding that that is not true, there is a lot of confusion, grief, a lot of, yeah, maybe even a lot of fear connected with that. And it's interesting that you kind of took that question and brought it to us and Woodstock and sort of these places here that we have always considered to be kind of bedrock for us, Woodstock, be it, yeah, let's say Char Dukan or different spots around the hillside. And I feel like in this small context here, kind of also what we've been saying just now, that it's kind of about, and this is going to sound very spiritual, but I don't care, making peace with impermanence and with just the ever-changing nature of places, of memories, of life, and kind of being able to let go of the things that we want to make manifest for ourselves because they give us comfort or a sense of belonging. It's painful, but I feel like this, maybe this gesture of opening our hands and say, or even throwing up our hands and not having anything that we're holding on to, like that's something that applies both for here and for this sort of world at large, if that makes sense. But I'm still mulling it through. This is just sort of my first association of that. Yeah.
Just to add to, I mean, that was very deep and insightful. And just to add one layer to that, is, you know, again, your question, bringing it back to here, our experience, is just this, the reflection on the fact that these last 2-3 years for many people were very lonely years or disconnected years. Maybe not even socially, but disconnection in many other ways, and career-wise or whatever. But so just, I mean, what just, I think you've been hearing this kind of again and again, that the profoundness of this experience that we've had has been connection, right? Connection with each other, connection with a place, and with all of its complications, like as we've said, you know, that they're not, the memories aren't all good, right? So, and all of those aspects of coming to a place, coming to the memories of that place. But just decide this, there is definitely, you know, within all of this impermanence, which is reality, there are these, there is this sense that, you know, something that is also changing, but you can nurture is relationships. And you know, for me, just very personally, just, you know, being able to connect with a friend, you know, we've not been able to hang out for whatever, 30 years. And so it's just been, you know, beautiful. And I think that's kind of the potential for even us in this, and that we've experienced that, we've tasted that, and new friendships, you know, because of that discovering those common tattoos. But I think that, you know, within this taking it out, back out, the need, I think there's everything is relational, right? We're relating to this brick, right, in such a conscious way, you know, but I think that just to maybe summarize it in this point, that there, you know, within everything that changes, that the ability to maintain and nurture those relationships really pulls us through. It's kind of, that's the reality of life, is these connections that we have with each other. And so yeah, that was just my 2 bits.
Thank you. So if anything, the last 3 weeks was a lot of this kind of conversation. So I'm glad we were able to give a glimpse of this to all of you. After this, we are having a live walkthrough for everybody online. Please continue the conversations. I think it'll be a great evening of, you know, taking forward from these conversations. After the program, we'll all be going for dinner to Tavern. But before we end, I wanted to give an opportunity to Jamie briefly to share a few words. Katie, Joe, and then if Stefan, you could end the panel for us, and then we'll go into the live walkthrough on Instagram for all online.
Thank you, Isaac. And thank you to all of you guys who have been here and have been sharing this whole time. Tanya, I like what you said about having like a mental breakdown or block at certain times, because that certainly would happen to me if I were in your shoes. It's a lot to take in, a lot to process. But you've all done such an admirable job of processing your feelings and then sharing those. Woodstock is such a big, complex entity. You know, it really is. And early on, we talked about Woodstock identity and what that is and how the school is grappling with it now. Post-pandemic, when we've all been online for 2 years, not having that sense of community, all of these stories and the trigger points and the places, the students for the last 2 years have not had that. Their Woodstock experience is completely different. And what is Woodstock when you're not here? You know? That's a big question that we're asking ourselves. Bless you. And so thank you for processing those things, for your comments today. I was really looking forward to hearing these things sort of at the end of the residency, how all of that got processed. And I think there's still a lot to process. And so I really want to hear more from you guys as this goes on. After a few weeks, after a few months, write us, let us know what you're thinking, how these things have shaped you, and you continue to think about all of this. And you always have a home in the CFI. Thanks.
Well, I don't know how much I can add to that, but I do also thank you all. It has been so gratifying, and just for everything you've done to contribute to our ongoing conversation, because these are conversations that we all continue to have every day. And I was joking with Isaac the other day about, it's the Woodstock way to just bite off more than you can chew, and then see what you can actually come up with at the end of it. And I feel like you all did that with this residency, and I look forward to talking to you later. I kind of wanted to hear from you about, Shubi was talking about discouraging, joking about discouraging people from an artist's life. And I kind of want to know what glimmer, what moments of encouragement or bright points of things you discovered about yourself or heard from others you'll be able to take forward into your art in the future, and help, edify you in those moments that aren't so easy in the future. And I also really appreciate the conversation about alumni touch points here that Stefan brought up about how a lot of times they are very surface, and how we can make it a more kind of immersive experience for everyone going forward. But it's been such a pleasure to be a part of your immersive experience here, and look forward to remaining in touch with you for a long time to come.
I'll just some closing remarks. One image that I had that I've shared a couple of times is, what CFI, what the alumni department, what the art department, what the Woodstock Artists Affinity Group, the artists, kind of what we worked on for the last 6 to 8 months to make this happen was sort of summarized in this image of bringing these 7 people, 7 plus actually more, because we had volunteers, 2 assistants who are also alumni join us, and Isaac as the facilitator, also alumni. So I should say 8 plus 3, right? So that's Joshua. So 11. Okay. So we picked up 11 paratroopers, right? We put them in this plane, and at the dead of night we dropped them over the hillside here. And they spread out, and what they did was they made sense of this stimulus that they were getting, right? And art is all about making sense. Art is about whether you are consciously doing it or not, it happens. Art takes things and processes it and brings out meaning, right? So here what we did is we brought these folks in to make meaning, make sense of of a place, and not just a physical place. It's a relational place. It's not just a place of the present. It's also a place with a past, and it's a place with a future, right? And so, kind of there's a role that art played in this, and hopefully as we look at the art itself, you'll catch this, is making sense, speaking about things at a deeper level, in language of poetry, right? It's not a journalist telling you the facts, right? It's not a preacher telling you how things should be. It's bringing up questions, right? And helping you think through and engage with really, really deep things. And it's multi-layered. Like some of it is a memory of a ramen packet, right? But what's behind that? There's like the beauty of art is that you can keep digging and digging, and there's deeper and deeper things that you may have no connection to the artist, right? You may not know who they are, but it reveals. And so that's the one point I wanted to make, is this is kind of what has happened, which I think is brilliant. Another point I just want to make, and kind of answers my question. I was setting myself up maybe for this and being able to say this, but it's, I think, very important that Woodstock has had this. I think that there's the administrators who are thinking through, okay, where are we at? What's the budgets? Where do we need to be 5 years from now? There's the teaching, academic leadership, looking at pedagogy, but then there's the need to bring people in and ask these sort of deeper questions about who are we, what is this place, and not just artists, but alumni artists. And I think one of the things that, just to answer my own question, I see here is that there's a role, it's not even a role, there's already a place that alumni live in, that you guys you guys inhabit. And it may not be a physical place, right? Many of you guys have just turned up on the hillside. There's folks maybe online who've have not been on here for decades. But there is, I almost feel like the term alumni is sort of, it makes you think of somebody who's gone away, right? And who's just going to come back. But I just think that this is an example of where that you guys are a part of Woodstock still, a part of the living Woodstock. You're part of the future of Woodstock, not just through a donation or a visit, but you're existentially here. And I think that this is an example, like a concrete example of that manifesting itself, in an actual, it's an event, but, and I just think that there's so much to be able to realize this fact that you guys aren't separate from this place. And what are other ways that we can find that reality, activate it, make it happen. Not make it happen; it's already there. But give body to it. And those are very kind of theoretical or conceptual ways of thinking of it. But they're very practical, concrete things. But before that, you have to realize that you still are Woodstock. And I'm not saying that in a sentimental way. We still, you're not that we need you or anything, and I'm speaking as a teacher currently here as a staff member, but that you just are, and let's find ways to realize that and understand that better. Does that make any sense at all? Yes. Does? Okay, great. Thank you. So thanks guys for being here physically and online. And for
Thank you, everybody. And for all those online, if you could join us on Instagram Live, and Anika will be taking us across the halls and to each of the artworks that are there. And if I could request the artists to be near your works, just as Anika comes around.
And our handle is @Woodstock Alumni.
And the handle is?
Just Woodstock Alumni.
Woodstock Alumni. We're live now. All right. Is it on? We don't need a thing, right? And how many people are there?
People are joining 3 people.